Welcome back. Another segment of Envision Lake Charles with Marshall Simien. And Marshall, in our last segment, we talked a lot about the state of the city of Lake Charles, and you shared a lot of great insight on where we are and also the potential of where we could be.
Sure.
And which leads into our next segment, with the economic and community development, we're just gonna dive right into it.
Sure.
Let's talk about your plans and your ideas and your theories behind economic and community development of the city of Lake Charles.
But Donnie, if you recall last time, I said we got so much to work with, you know? There's two theories to economic development. One is get a bigger piece of the pie. The only problem with that is it presumes the pie is as big as it's going to get. And to get a bigger slice, you got to cut into somebody else's slice. And that creates friction, you know?
Correct.
My theory is that you just make the whole pie bigger. But in order to make the pie bigger, you got to do two things. You got to have a lot of ingredients, and I'm going to talk about all the ingredients we have to work with. But you also need a cook, somebody who can cook that, because the wrong cook can ruin those ingredients as well as make them sweet and come together. So when I look at economic development in this area, I look at it from two perspectives that I had. The first one was when I got on the port board, Port of Lake Charles. Right now, that's the 10th largest port in the United States. Little Lake Charles is a very significant and strategic port because of the industry, what it does, and everything that's out there. But I just also served on the State Board of Commerce and Industry. Now, Commerce and Industry works with the Louisiana Department of Economic Development. We handle ITEP applications. That's industrial tax exemptions. That's those where you try to attract industries by giving them tax breaks on different things. And this area is probably one of the most significant ITEP areas in the entire state. So, for instance, when the hurricanes hit, most places around the state, they get excited about multi-million-dollar projects coming to this. Everything coming to Southwest Louisiana was multi-billion. So when the hurricanes hit, everybody just thought, you guys are all right, this is just a bump in the road. Little did they know that out of this, not only would we have struggled with recovery over this time, but we lost the most iconic building in our city, 22 stories worth of building that could have been resurrected. So at that point, you realize that we're on our own in many ways, you know. We went to Washington, D.C. The people were asking, why should we use our tax money to help you guys when it's just going to happen again? And I told them, I said, Louisiana is one of the few states that generates more money for the federal government than it takes in. But along the way, we've got substrata that's loosening and everything else. And so, but a state, we get to keep a third of whatever they take from us, or a fixed amount, whichever is less. I said, if you treated us like a state like Wisconsin that keeps 50% of whatever they do, you'd never see us again, because we could generate more than enough to take care of ourselves if we didn't have to share it with the rest of the country. Just like with energy, the LNG that comes through here it fuels the entire country. In wintertime, a lot of people need us here because guess what? They'll freeze or die if we're not here. So understanding that and understanding how to leverage that is important. On the port, we had to leverage. We had to get we were charged with dredging the ship channel, but whenever New Orleans would call for the dredgers, they just leave. So we had a real problem because the industry needs their supplies coming in. We've got two major refineries that the ship channel was silting so much that the ships had to take less because they were literally scraping the bottom.
Oh, wow.
So we said, well, let's see what we have as Southwest Louisiana. Well, PPG is a Pennsylvania company. The largest production group in their system is right here. So we said, PPG, called the Pennsylvania delegation in Congress. We're going to Washington, D.C. We called Conoco out of Texas, called the Texas delegation. It was Highmont back then, called Delaware. By the time we went to Washington, D.C., we looked like the Electoral College. We got everybody's attention. Today, we have the Speaker of the House that represents a part of the Lake Charles. So we've got some ingredients there, but like I said earlier, we've got I-10 corridor. You've got I-210. I mean, you've got two major interstates running right through our city.
Yeah.
And if you look at a city like a human body, wherever you got blood flow, you've got life.
All right.
We've got major arteries, but you can tell where they're not functioning because if you look at 210 by Chenault, I look at Chenault like I look at the port. Chenault is a major engine that just hasn't been fully activated. But from Chenault at Legion Street to Broad Street, there's no service road. And you look there, there's nothing but overgrowth and older communities. You look at from Pat's of Henderson to the school board on Broad Street, there's no service road. You just got open land over there. But everywhere you put service roads, you got development. So 210 is just waiting, but there's certain things that would come to our area that would locate on 210, but they wouldn't necessarily thrive on I-10. There's certain businesses that will come on I-10 that you couldn't get on 210. So the sweet spot is how do you identify the type of things that could come in that's going to complement each other, not compete. And then fold that in with the locals, because you got local businesses, you got local investors, and once you hit that sweet spot, you've got all these ingredients that could come into play, and you can do a lot of things.
You know, with all those capabilities and the potential, again, you know, we talk about the scientific aspect of potential energy and kinetic energy. You know, we're looking at the power of motion.
Yes.
Let's say day one, you're activated as the new mayor. How do you turn that potential energy into kinetic energy to where we move forward and we start taking advantage of some of these opportunities?
I think you need to clearly identify what talent you have to work with, because right now I'm seeing where the public sector is literally competing with the private sector. You know, I think I truly believe the public sector, the government, should be putting down the infrastructure and the support that's going to help the private sector come in and bring what it needs to do. And I give you an example. The Capital One building, my office was in there I was on the 11th floor for like 15 years. I had people that came through that understood the beauty of the building, the functionality of the building. They didn't think it would work. It was workable as an office space, but they always thought that, boy, this building, if it was reconfigured into a convention hotel and with the property that it has can put a conference center, not only would that make Lake Charles a major destination now for conferences, because the casinos don't want them on the weekends, but also it opens up opportunities to rethink the areas that you already have that are starting to degrade, like the Civic Center, or they call it the Event Center, but it's you just changed the name. It's the Civic Center, but it's an older, antiquated building. It's surrounded by just concrete. It's the city's front porch, but it's not the city's front porch. You know, I would start identifying what talent do we have to start rethinking this. You know, the Woodlands is famous for having everything, but they have garages. They stag the parking. When I was on the city council, I kept the garage when Harris gave us their property. People thought I was crazy, but you look at the garage now, it is a parking solution. And you can put more business in there where people can walk from business to business instead of walking through somebody's parking lot to get to the next business. So we need to start thinking about that. But the other thing is the city, and not just the mayor of Lake Charles, the mayor of Sulphur, the mayor of Westlake, the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury Administrator, Visit Lake Charles, the Chamber. We need to get a group that's going to go and take a road trip. Because you show up with the right people that goes into these corporate offices, like where Top Golf is, which Lafayette has, Dave and Buster's, which Lafayette has, Bucky's, which Lafayette has, and you sit there and give them a simple question. What would it take for you to come to Lake Charles? Not, we want you to fit within your square peg and our round hole. What would it take for you to do that? And then come back and use imaginative ways to make that happen, but also do it in a way where those would seed different developments to pull people in, and then put in complementary local businesses that's going to thrive off of that. You start cooking that pie. But as long as we don't have that kind of vision, and we're putting things out there like, example, the Children's Museum. And this is just to say how I think. A lot of people think, well, at least we're turning dirt. That's in business, which I represent a lot of businesses, that's not the key. Is how do you make an investment give you a return? So look at the Children's Museum. You got this large facility, and when we on the city council, we put a road by Millennium Park when we rebuilt it, because we wanted to put the Children's Museum there with a Chuck E. Cheese or something, made that kid-centric. Lakefront was going to be adult and family. But you've got a Children's Museum sitting on the I-10, on front of I-10, which is the highest human trafficking corridor in the South. it's next to a bar, and I'm not disparaging Crying Eagle, but I mean, at the end of the day, it is a bar next to a children's museum. But across the street, you have an adult sex store. And then you have hotels that you look in the newspaper, you see registered sex offenders in there. So just from my standpoint, strategically, that was not a good fit. But, you know, that's where we're going, and you got to work with what you have. I would think that when I wanted to do the Capital One Tower, we brought a group that wanted to actually develop it into a hotel and a conference center. You start bringing the local conventions in. These people coming in, it adds days to the stays at the casinos.
Yeah.
You put a water tax to get people, then that starts generating money. But when I did that study about the I-10 corridor, I talked about the 2.1 billion. People told me, they said, Marcia, you need to look at that again. You know what that 2.1 billion is? Does that number look familiar? I said, well, that's the cost of the new I-10 bridge. They said, you figured out how to pay for that bridge every year. I said, but the beauty of it is the government, the city, should always get theirs on the back end.
Yeah.
That's going to be through the sales taxes, property taxes.
Yeah.
You can't go out there and try to build stuff, because that's not your function. But I showed that the city itself, with the city and parish taxes that were being generated from that, just that one corridor, will generate about $140 million worth of taxes. That's, at the time I was on the city council, the city budget was $48 million. So you almost triple that. But what does that do? That extra money that's in the pie, now you can fix a lot of infrastructure. The south side of town, I can tell you, they're struggling with traffic because they're so far behind. Just to catch up is daunting. They're not going to want to raise their taxes, and they shouldn't have to. We just need to activate these assets. And once you show that you've got this kind of revenue coming in with any business, you can go and borrow against that. You can bond that out. And instead of fixing up one road to this block and then having to wait of time and do another road, just do all of them at one time. Some places are doing that, and you can see the growth, you can see the imagination, and you can see the investment, but it also changes the quality of life, the way people see their city, and then you start attracting people.
Yeah, and you know, you touched on something earlier. You mentioned about all the amenities and attractions that Lafayette has. Have you ever sat down with anybody that's in leadership or any kind of economic development in Lafayette and pick their brains to where you can say, okay, this is what they're doing to attract those. What can we bring to here, to Lake Charles? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I know a lot of people that are in business in Lafayette. Some of them lawyers, some of them other people. One that I do know is Mandy Mitchell. Mandy was on the Louisiana Department of Economic Development when I was on the Board of Commerce and Industry. She's from Lafayette. Very sharp person, know her very well, but now she's the head. She is now the CEO of the Louisiana Lafayette Department of Economic Development. So she's actually head of economic development, and she's the one that's responsible for helping pull some of these things in. But they have a very dedicated group that goes out and sells Lafayette, the Acadiana region, and they get in all the elected officials, the head of those, to come in and give them the support that they need to do that. So they have a team approach. And you see it's bearing fruit.
Yeah, and man, that's absolutely incredible. I can't wait to dive more into that because I think it's important that we take from what others are having success with and bring home to where we can have those same successes. So again, we're gonna come back with another segment with Envision Lake Charles with Marshall Simien. So sit tight, we'll be back.
Sitting tight.
Sit